Picture this. You are standing, I don't know, maybe 500 feet away from a literal wall of erupting lava.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the ground beneath your boots is actually vibrating. The heat against your face feels like you just opened an oven door.
Right?
And the craziest part, you flew across the Pacific Ocean to get to this exact spot for only $500 round trip.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is, but when the adrenaline fades and you get back to your 3-star hotel room, you look at your receipt and realize the local government just quietly slapped an 18.5% tax on your bed.
Yeah, that's the catch.
And the rental car sitting in the parking lot that's bleeding you for another $100 a day.
Welcome to Phil and H Travel. Today's deep dive is into Hilo, Hawaii in the year 2026. And we are looking at a travel landscape that is honestly a massive, confusing paradox. Is it worth it? Let's find out. It is the absolute definition of a macroeconomic squeeze. Welcome to all of you listening. Whether you are actively mapping out a family spring break escape, or trying to figure out where to spend your remote working month, or, you're just genuinely fascinated by the sheer economics of global tourism, this deep dive is designed entirely for you.
Absolutely.
Our mission today is to pull apart a comprehensive logistics-first travel report detailing the realities of Hilo right now. We need to figure out the truth. Is this town Hawaii's absolute best-kept secret? Like the last bastion of authenticity?
Or a trap.
Right. Or is it a meticulously designed financial and logistical trap just waiting to swallow the unprepared traveler? And I promise you, we are giving you the brutal, unvarnished facts today. There is zero tourism board spin allowed on this show.
Okay, let's unpack this because these numbers we are looking at are they're wild. The data tells a story that basically breaks traditional economic logic. Usually when a place gets popular, flight prices go up, right?
Supply and demand.
Exactly. But here, flight searches to Hilo are up an astonishing 60% year over year. Kayak just named it in their 2026 What the Future report as a top emerging destination.
Yeah, and Airbnb is flagging it as a trending spring break spot, too.
Right. Plus, Kilauea volcano is continuously erupting. We're talking 41 episodes and counting, which is drawing massive global attention. Yet, right in the middle of all this surging interest, the average airfare for a spring flight is actually down 26%.
It's so counterintuitive.
It really is. Airlines are practically throwing seats at people with round-trip economy flights averaging about $503. But the second you step off the plane, the tax burden has skyrocketed.
Oh, massively.
Yeah, on January 1st, the transient accommodations tax went up to 11%. They added a new 0.75% green fee, and when you stack that with county and general excise taxes, a standard $200 room suddenly costs $238 a night.
Just out of nowhere.
To me, this dynamic feels exactly like a hot tech stock that's about to split. Everyone is rushing in before the market fully adjusts, but the hidden fees are eating up the margins. So are these 1,500-foot lava fountains at Kilauea the sole reason for this 60% surge in searches, or is there a bigger chess game happening here?
What's fascinating here is that we are watching a perfect storm of two completely opposing forces. And you, the traveler, are caught right in the middle of it.
Like a tug of war.
Exactly. You have the global airline industry on one side and the local Hawaiian government on the other. Let's look at the mechanics of this. Airlines use highly sophisticated dynamic pricing algorithms to detect emerging interest.
Right.
They see the search volume spiking because of the volcanic activity.
Yeah.
But they also know that to stimulate actual booking volume on a route that isn't traditionally a mega resort hub like Honolulu or Maui, they need to drop the initial barrier to entry.
Hence the 26% drop in airfare.
Right. They are essentially dangling a carrot. They want to fill the metal tubes. But simultaneously, the local and state governments in Hawaii are looking at this impending influx of visitors and facing a very different reality.
What are they seeing?
Well, they're looking at their water supply, their 2-lane rural roads, their waste management systems, and saying, our infrastructure cannot handle unlimited, frictionless tourism.
So the government is essentially building a financial seawall to slow down the flood of people the airlines are bringing in.
Exactly. They are tightening the net on the ground to extract maximum revenue from the tourists who do arrive. They're essentially saying to the traveler, we will let you come, we welcome you, but you're going to pay a premium for the privilege of utilizing our very fragile environment.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
They know that once you've committed to that cheap $500 flight, you are a captive audience. You have to sleep somewhere.
Right. The airlines lure you in with the cheap flight, and the local government catches you at the hotel checkout. It's brilliant, really, if you're looking at it purely from a revenue extraction standpoint. But it is a nightmare if you're the one trying to stick to a budget.
Precisely. And to understand why people are overwhelmingly willing to pay these new taxes, which, by the way, comes out to an extra $266 a week on average that absolutely wasn't in their pre-2026 budgets, we have to look at when they are choosing to go and what physical realities they are battling when they get there.
Which brings us to a major point of friction, the weather and the timing. And I have to push back on something in the sources right away because this genuinely confused me when I was reviewing the data.
Oh, the rain.
Yes. The report explicitly notes that Hilo gets roughly 130 inches of rain a year. 130 inches. To put that in perspective for you listening, Seattle, a city famous for rain, gets about 39 inches a year.
It's a staggering difference.
That means Hilo gets more than triple the rain of Seattle. That sounds absolutely miserable for a vacation. When I read that, my mind immediately goes to a gloomy, bone-chilling week in London, where you don't see the sun for days, you're wearing 3 layers, and everything just feels damp and depressing.
Right.
Why on earth are searches up 60% for a place that wet? Are people flying to Hawaii just to sit inside their hotel rooms and watch Netflix while it pours?
It's a completely fair reaction, and honestly, it's the #1 misconception people have when they look at a spreadsheet of climate data instead of experiencing the microclimates of the Pacific.
Okay, so what am I missing?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of tropical meteorology, we have to entirely separate our concept of mainland or European rain from Hawaiian rain. 130 inches in London would indeed be an endless, soul-crushing gray drizzle. But in Hilo, you are dealing with the mechanics of tropical orographic lift.
Wait, orographic lift. Break that down for me.
Think of it this way. The Big Island is home to massive volcanoes, Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, which are over 13,000 feet tall. The warm, moist trade winds blow across the Pacific Ocean, hit these massive mountains right at the town of Hilo, and are forced upward.
Okay.
As the air rises, it cools, and it drops all that moisture right on the eastern slopes. But the execution of that rain is what matters to you as a traveler. It is not an all-day drizzle.
So what does it look like?
You wake up at 7 a.m. to brilliant, intense sunshine. The humidity builds throughout the morning. By 1 p.m. or 2 p.m., the sky over the mountain darkens and the sky opens up, dumping a biblical amount of warm water for maybe 45 minutes or an hour.
Just a total deluge.
Yes. And then the clouds break, the intense sun comes back out, and because the air is so saturated, you get these massive, vibrant double rainbows stretching entirely across Hilo Bay. There is a reason their most famous landmark, located 5 minutes from downtown, is literally called Rainbow Falls.
Okay, that changes the picture completely. So it's not an all-day atmospheric dampener that ruins your plans. It's more like a highly scheduled, aggressive daily car wash for the rainforest.
That's a great way to put it.
You just know that at 2 p.m., you should probably be sitting on a covered lanai having a coffee or a beer rather than starting a 5-mile hike.
Exactly. It requires a rhythm.
Yeah.
And the timing of the year you visit dictates how aggressive that car wash is. The relatively dry window is April to September. And April is really the cultural sweet spot.
Right.
This isn't just because of the weather, it's because of the Merry Monarch Festival.
Yes, the sources highlight the Merry Monarch Festival heavily. It happens the week after Easter. For those who don't know, this isn't just a local parade. It is the world's most prestigious hula competition. It is essentially the Olympics of Native Hawaiian culture.
It is the single biggest cultural event in Hilo, and arguably in all of Hawaii. Hula halos, the schools, train for years to compete here. The entire town transforms.
I can imagine.
The energy is incredible, filled with craft fairs, music, and profound cultural pride. But logistically, accommodations for the Merry Monarch book out literally a year in advance. Rental cars vanish.
Wow.
Yeah, if you are planning a trip for April 2026, you either have to be hyper-organized and book everything 12 months out, or you have to intentionally avoid that specific week if you want any hope of finding a reasonably priced room.
So April is amazing but packed. Winter, on the other hand, October through March, is when things get tricky. The report notes this brings much heavier rain, muddy trails, and more frequent volcanic fog.
Yes, the trade winds can die down in the winter, which changes the weather patterns entirely. The rain becomes more sustained.
But there's a trade-off, right?
There is. The economic trade-off for the winter mud is that hotel prices drop 15 to 25%. If you are a traveler who doesn't mind wearing a raincoat and you want to save hundreds of dollars, November or early February is a strategic play.
Though, according to the data we have, spring break, March and April 2026, is the absolute pressure point right now. That's where this 60% search surge is heavily concentrated. Everyone wants to escape the end of the mainland winter, so if you do time it right and you go during this pressure point, you're inevitably going to run into crowds.
You are. But the behavioral economics of these crowd flashpoints in Hilo are really interesting to analyze because it doesn't behave like a normal tourist trap.
How so?
Hilo doesn't have Waikiki-level infrastructure. There are no massive 6-lane highways or sprawling parking garages at the attractions. Because the infrastructure is limited, the crowds bottleneck at very specific, highly predictable times.
Like where?
The Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, for example, jams up by mid-morning. The parking lots on Crater Rin Drive, especially near the Thurston Lava Tube, are completely full by 10 a.m. The Saturday Farmers Market downtown is shoulder to shoulder by 9 a.m.
Which means if you just follow your normal, relaxed vacation instinct to sleep in, wake up at 8:30, grab a leisurely coffee, and roll out to the sites at 9:30, you are walking straight into a logistical nightmare. You're going to spend your vacation circling parking lots.
Right. And the ultimate travel hack here, which costs you absolutely nothing, is simply shifting your biological clock.
Tell me more about that.
Because Hawaii is 2 to 3 hours behind the West Coast and up to 6 hours behind the East Coast, your body naturally wants to wake up early anyway. Lean into that. If you arrive at the national park before 8 a.m., or if you wait and go after 4 p.m. when the day trippers from Kona have left, you bypass the bottleneck entirely.
That makes total sense.
And if you hit the farmers market right when it opens at 7 a.m., you get the absolute best selection of fresh fruit, the vendors are relaxed, and there's zero shoulder checking. You are letting the sleeping masses absorb the friction of the crowds while you glide through the best parts of the town.
That is a phenomenal piece of advice. Let the time zone work for you, not against you. Now, assuming you manage to hack your sleep schedule and dodge those 9 a.m. crowds, I really want to talk about what actually happens when you step off that plane. Because the sources paint a picture of first impressions that is drastically, fundamentally different from what people picture when they hear the phrase Hawaii vacation.
It is a profound culture shock for the uninitiated.
Absolutely. You land at Hilo International Airport. It's small, it's open air, it feels a bit dated. You grab a $15 to $20 taxi for a 7-minute ride into downtown. And immediately, as you're driving, you realize there are no high-rise resort towers.
Not at all.
There are no luxury shopping strips with Gucci and Prada. There are no massive beach clubs with rows of white umbrellas. Instead, you're driving down Banyan Drive looking at these massive, sprawling banyan trees that were planted by celebrities like Babe Ruth and Amelia Earhart back in the 1930s.
Yeah, the history there is wild.
And you are sweating in a 28 degrees Celsius humid climate. It sounds like stepping into a 1990s time capsule that just happens to be located inside a massive tropical terrarium.
That is a brilliant visual, and it captures the essence of Hilo perfectly. The visual palette of the town is overwhelmingly, aggressively green. The concrete is stained with moss. The air smells like rain and flowers.
It sounds kind of beautiful, honestly.
It really is. You are in a functioning, small, somewhat blue-collar American town that happens to be sitting on the edge of one of the densest rainforests in the United States. It is not built to impress you. It is built to sustain the people who live there.
But here's what I don't get, and I need you to explain this mechanism to me. The sources insist that a rental car is absolutely non-negotiable for this trip, to the tune of $40 to $70 a day. But if Hilo is a small functioning town, why can't I just walk to a cafe from my hotel, have breakfast, and then call a rideshare like Uber or Lyft to go see the waterfall, just like I would in literally any other city in the world? Why am I forced to take on the financial liability of a rental car?
This raises an important question about the difference between civic infrastructure and tourist convenience. You can open your app and call an Uber or Lyft in Hilo.
Okay, so they exist.
They do. But because Hilo is not a curated mega resort hub, there isn't an army of drivers waiting outside your hotel lobby. You aren't in Manhattan or downtown Chicago. You might wait 5, 10, or even 20 minutes for a ride to be accepted, and those drivers are largely concentrated just in the immediate downtown area.
Ah, I see.
They are driving locals to the grocery store or the medical clinic. If you take an Uber out to Akaka Falls, which is a decent drive north of town, you might get dropped off fine, but you might find absolutely zero cars available to pick you up and bring you back. You could be stranded in the rainforest.
Wow. Okay. So relying on rideshares is basically playing Russian roulette with your itinerary.
Exactly. The lack of mega resort infrastructure is actually Hilo's greatest asset. But it requires a fundamental shift in how you navigate. It forces you into the reality of the local geography. The island is massive. It's called the Big Island for a reason. You could fit all the other Hawaiian islands inside it.
Right.
You need the car because of the spectacular things you want to see, the towering waterfalls, the black sand beaches, the erupting volcano. They are spread out across a vast, rural, incredibly diverse landscape. A rental car isn't just a vehicle, it's your lifeline to the island.
So the 15-minute wait for an Uber downtown isn't a bug in the system. It's proof that you aren't in a tourist trap. You're in a real town.
Precisely. You aren't in a curated bubble where a golf cart takes you from your suite directly to the private beach. And because there are no mega resorts dictating the real estate, the entire landscape of where you sleep, and importantly, what you pay for it, is completely flipped on its head compared to the rest of Hawaii.
Let's get into those sleeping arrangements because the zoning and the budgets and the sources are fascinating. The report breaks Hilo down into 4 main accommodation zones: downtown, Banyan Drive, Greater Hilo, and Volcano Village up by the park. And they heavily segment the pricing tiers. I want to start with the backpackers.
Sure.
They quote $40 to $80 a night. But reading the fine print of this report, finding a true backpacker hostel in Hilo sounds like finding a vegan restaurant at a Texas barbecue festival. They technically exist, but you have to seriously compromise your expectations. It specifically mentions places like Arnett's Lodge. It sounds basic, communal, and definitely not the booming, party-heavy backpacker scene you'd find in a place like Phuket or Bali.
No, absolutely not. And this is a crucial point for young travelers to understand. Hawaii's baseline cost floor naturally filters out the ultra-budget $20 a day party hostel circuit.
Why is that?
The cost of real estate, the cost of electricity, the cost of insurance, all of it means a business cannot survive charging $20 a bed. Places like Arnett's Lodge are fantastic for what they are. They're clean, highly functional base camps for hikers and nature enthusiasts. But if you are coming to Hilo expecting to meet 100 other 22-year-olds drinking cheap beer out of buckets until 3 a.m., you are going to be sitting by yourself in the dark.
Good to know. So the backpacker scene is more early to bed for a sunrise hike than stay up late raging. Now, moving up to the mid-range tier, the report quotes $150 to $250 a night. It specifically highlights places like the Grand Nanaloa Hotel on Banyan Drive sitting at around $170. When I see that, I'm shocked.
In a good way.
Yeah, that actually seems entirely reasonable for an oceanfront property with a pool, especially when you consider that a similar oceanfront property on the Kona side of the island, or in Maui, would be double or triple that price.
It is the absolute sweet spot for value in all of Hawaii. What you are seeing here on Banyan Drive is the democratization of the coastline. Let me explain the history of why this exists.
Please do.
In the 1970s and 80s, when the mega resorts, the massive Hiltons and Marriotts charging $450 to $700 a night today, were looking to build, they bypassed Hilo entirely.
Because of the rain?
Exactly, because of the 130 inches of rain and the jagged, rocky lava coastlines. Mega resorts demand white sand and guaranteed sunshine to justify their prices. Because they never took root in Hilo, the oceanfront real estate remained occupied by these mid-century, slightly dated, but incredibly charming mid-tier hotels.
That's amazing.
You're getting million-dollar views for mid-tier prices simply because you might have to endure a rain shower in the afternoon.
That is a phenomenal trade-off if you have the right mindset. But what about families? The sources note that family budgets are around $200 to $350 a night, and they mostly rely on VRBO or Airbnb rentals to get that crucial extra space and a full kitchen to cook meals. But there's a very specific, ominous note here about tightened Airbnb regulations in Hawaii.
Yes.
Has the local government secretly ruined the family vacation market by throttling the short-term rentals?
Ruined is a strong word, but they have intentionally added massive friction to the market, and for very good reason. We need to look at the socioeconomic reality of Hawaii. Over the last decade, unchecked short-term rentals were hollowing out residential neighborhoods.
Like pushing locals out.
Exactly. Imagine you are a nurse or a teacher living in Hilo. Suddenly, the 3-bedroom house next door to you is bought by an off-island investor, flipped into an Airbnb, and rented out for $8,000 a month to rotating groups of tourists. It drives property values and long-term rent into the stratosphere, displacing the local workforce. It became a crisis.
So the government stepped in.
So the government cracked down hard. They instituted strict zoning laws. You cannot just operate a short-term rental anywhere you want anymore. You must have a specific permit, and they are incredibly hard to get.
So what does that mean for the family trying to book a trip?
It means the inventory of legal Airbnbs has thinned out significantly. You can no longer just log on a week before your trip and expect to find a cheap three-bedroom house. You have to book much further in advance now, and you must verify that the property is legally permitted.
But there's an upside, right?
And this is a huge upside. Greater Hilo retains its actual residential neighborhood feel. Because the government protected the housing stock, when you rent a permitted home, you are staying next to an actual local family. You are in a real community, not in a hollowed-out street comprised entirely of transient tourist rentals.
So you're trading booking convenience for authentic neighborhood preservation. I respect that. And finally, if you have the budget, the sources outline a luxury tier running $280 to upwards of $500 a night. But again, just like everything else in Hilo, it's not conventional luxury, right? It mentions places like the Inn at Kilauea Falls, which starts around $300.
Right. If your definition of luxury is having a butler unpack your bags, a private cabana with bottle service, and a massive spa facility, Hilo is simply not your destination.
Definitely not.
Luxury here is fundamentally experiential. It's paying a premium to stay at an incredible off-grid bed and breakfast where you have exclusive private access to a towering, cascading waterfall right on the property, completely surrounded by dense, untouched rainforest. It is a profound, quiet luxury. It's about access to pristine nature rather than flashy, conspicuous consumption.
Okay, let's pivot. Because if you're saving hundreds of dollars a night by skipping the flashy mega resort room and staying at a mid-tier spot or a VRBO, you're going to notice an even more massive difference in how and what you eat. Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources dive incredibly deep into Hilo's food economy, and the data shows it is entirely dominated by the local food scene, not the tourist traps.
It is arguably one of the strongest arguments for choosing Hilo over anywhere else in Hawaii. The food economy here is a masterclass in local sustainability.
Let me run through some of these numbers because the contrast is wild. At the Saturday Farmers Market downtown, you can get a fresh, incredibly high-quality poke bowl for $10.
Which is practically unheard of.
Right. You can get malasadas, those amazing deep-fried Portuguese Hawaiian donuts coated in sugar for $2 a piece. At the legendary Susan Fish Market right on the bayfront, fresh ahi poke is $16 to $22 a pound. A massive half-pound sieving with hot rice is maybe $12, and it's universally considered some of the best you will ever eat in Hawaii. Even at a highly rated mid-range sit-down place like Moon and Turtle, a beautiful farm-to-table main course is only $18 to $28.
Which is, again, practically unheard of in a modern tourist destination, let alone an island.
But then you walk into a normal grocery store like KTA Superstores or Safeway thinking you're going to be frugal, and you get absolute sticker shock. The report says a gallon of milk is $6.69. A dozen standard eggs is $8.50. A basic box of cereal might be $9. So basically, I'm looking at this and thinking, should I just skip the $7 milk and eat fresh yellowfin tuna for breakfast every day?
Frankly, yes, you absolutely should. And this perfectly illustrates the vulnerability and the mechanics of island supply chain economics. We have to talk about something called the Jones Act.
A Jones Act.
Yes, it's a maritime law that mandates any cargo ship between two U.S. ports must be carried on U.S.-flagged, U.S.-built, and U.S.-crewed ships.
Okay, so how does a maritime law from 100 years ago make my cereal cost $9?
Because Hawaii is the most isolated population center on Earth. Everything that isn't grown there has to be shipped thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean, primarily by a single major shipping company, Matson. Think about that gallon of milk.
Okay.
It's a heavy, highly perishable item. It has to be refrigerated on a truck in California, loaded into a refrigerated container on a ship, sailed across the ocean for a week, unloaded in Honolulu, put onto a smaller inter-island barge, sailed to Hilo, and trucked to the grocery store. The sheer energy and logistical cost of that journey is baked directly into the sticker price. That results in a 30 to 50% markup over mainland U.S. prices.
That makes total sense. You aren't paying for the milk. You're paying for the refrigeration and the diesel fuel to get it across the ocean.
Exactly. But fresh tuna. That ahi was caught by a local fisherman on a small boat a few miles offshore at 4 a.m. that very morning. He brought it directly to the dock at Susan Fish Market, and they chopped it up. There is zero ocean shipping cost.
And the local fruit.
Dragon fruit, rambutan, apple bananas, they are grown on a farm a few miles up the road in volcanic soil. In Hilo, imported non-perishables that we consider basics on the mainland are the true luxury items, while incredibly high-quality, fresh local food is the cheap staple. You have to eat locally if you want to protect your budget.
That completely rewrites how you should budget for food. Don't go to Safeway for mainland comforts, go to the local markets for island staples. But I have to ask about this very specific warning in the report. It explicitly says to absolutely avoid restaurants near the cruise ship terminals or tour bus drop-offs on port days. Is the price gouging really that severe? It sounds a bit dramatic to actively avoid a whole section of town just because a boat is docked.
It's not dramatic. It's a known economic pivot that waterfront businesses make, and it's a brilliant study in dynamic local economics. Imagine you run a restaurant near the port. Suddenly, a massive floating city docks, and 3,000 people disembark.
Okay.
They have a captive window of maybe 6 hours.
Yeah.
They don't know the local prices. They are hungry, and they have deep vacation pockets. The restaurants know this. On port days, the physical menus at some places sometimes literally change.
Wait, really? The actual menus change?
The prices go up by 20%, the table turnover speed is prioritized over food quality, and the authentic, relaxed local experience entirely vanishes. Their processing volume. Checking the local cruise ship schedule online is a simple, zero-cost way to protect your wallet and your palate. Just go to a restaurant further inland on those days.
It's essentially surge pricing for food, exactly like an Uber during a rainstorm.
Got it. Now, speaking of respecting the local environment and not being that tourist, the sources spend significant time on cultural etiquette, which I find really important.
Oh, it's vital. They mention removing your shoes before entering homes to keep out the red volcanic dirt, understanding that aloha isn't just a marketing slogan used by hotels, but a profound way of life, and respecting the aina, which translates to the land. But there's a very specific, fascinating call out here. Never, ever stack rocks on the lava fields. People love doing this. You see it all over Instagram, people making those little Zen rock cairns out in the volcanic fields. Is it really that big of a deal, or are locals just being overly sensitive?
It is a massive deal, and it's a profound erasure of indigenous practices. We need to unpack why. To a tourist from California or Europe, stacking a few rocks feels entirely harmless. It feels almost spiritual, like leaving a gentle, personalized footprint to say, I was here.
Right, it seems innocent.
But in native Hawaiian culture, rock alignments and structures known as ahu have specific sacred meanings. They are not decorations. They can be ancient boundary markers for land divisions. They can be markers for burial sites, or they can be active spiritual shrines.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that.
Furthermore, the volcanic landscape itself is the physical embodiment of Pele, the volcano deity. Moving rocks to build a little monument for your social media feed is seen as deeply disrespectful to Pele. When tourists build these cairns, they are physically altering a sacred landscape to leave a personal ego monument, which is the exact antithesis of respecting the Aina. It was cultural graffiti.
Wow, that puts it in a completely different light. It's not just an eyesore for park rangers to clean up. It's culturally tone-deaf and spiritually offensive. So leave the rocks exactly where you found them. If we synthesize all of this, the accommodation costs, the farmers market food hacks, the rental car necessities, the realities of island shipping, what does a day in Hilo actually cost a traveler in 2026? Let's look at the daily budgets, the ultimate reality check.
Let's run the hard numbers because this is where the rubber meets the road for anyone planning a trip.
According to the report, a low-tier backpacker budget is $80 to $110 per person per day. That's assuming you are staying in shared budget rooms or camping, eating entirely from farmers markets or cheap poke counters, and splitting a rental car with another person. Mid-range is $150 to $200 a person, which gets you a real hotel room like the Nanaloa, some nice sit-down dinners, and paid activities. Luxury jumps to $350 to $500 a person, factoring in premium B&Bs, private guided tours, and fine dining.
And the digital nomads.
And then there's a specific call-out for digital nomads running $2,800 to $3,800 a month, mostly because securing a long-term car rental on the island is absolutely brutal financially. But I want to focus on that low-tier number, $110 a day for a budget backpacker. I've traveled around Southeast Asia, and $110 a day in Thailand or Vietnam means you are eating out 3 times a day, getting a daily massage, and staying in a private villa with a plunge pool. Are these sources telling us we need to completely redefine what the word budget means when we utter the word Hawaii?
Absolutely. You must fundamentally recalibrate your financial baseline before you even search for the flight ticket. Hawaii has a high, immovable cost floor.
What do you mean by cost floor?
What I mean is, you as a traveler can be incredibly disciplined. You can eat cheap poke for lunch, you can hike the free trails in the state parks, you can completely skip buying macadamia nut souvenirs. You can control your variable spending. But you cannot negotiate with the fixed costs dictated by global inflation and the geographic isolation we just discussed. The baseline price of a roof over your head that meets code, the daily weight of the rental car that has to be shipped to the island, the mandatory government taxes, these are fixed. They are the floor. You cannot go beneath it.
So budget in Hilo doesn't mean cheap. It doesn't mean $50 a day. It just means the absolute bare minimum amount of capital required to exist safely on the island without sleeping illegally on the beach.
Precisely. If you accept that floor up front and budget for that $110 a day, you won't experience budget shock when you arrive. You will understand that the premium you are paying is simply for the privilege of being in one of the most remote, beautiful places on Earth.
Well, let's talk more about budget shock, because even if you build your spreadsheet perfectly, the sources explicitly warn of 3 massive logistics traps that can destroy your financial planning in a matter of hours.
These are the hidden landmines of the 2026 travel landscape, and they are catching thousands of people off guard.
Trap number 1. The 18.5% tax ambush. We touched on this in the intro, but the mechanics of how it hits you are infuriating. Let me walk through a scenario. You go online to Expedia or Booking.com, you find a room listed at $180 a night. You feel great about it, it fits your budget perfectly. But because of the transient accommodations tax at 11%, the county surcharge, the general excise tax, and this new green fee, that room is actually $213 at checkout.
Yeah, the math hits you hard.
Over a 7-day week, that's an extra $231. It's a complete financial jump scare right when you go to hand over your credit card.
Wait, let me challenge this. Is there any legal loophole around this? Can you just call the hotel directly, pay in cash, and avoid the tax? Is this just a platform fee?
No, there are 0 legal loopholes. It applies to every single paid accommodation on the entire island, whether it's a massive corporate hotel, a tiny mom-and-pop bed and breakfast, or a VRBO rental. And the general excise tax, the GT, is particularly tricky for mainlanders to understand.
Why is that?
In most U.S. states, sales tax is charged directly to the consumer on goods. In Hawaii, the GET is technically a tax on the business's gross receipts, but they are legally allowed to pass it on to you, the consumer, so you are paying their tax burden.
Wow, so there's really no escaping it. No. And this raises an important question about the macro trend of green fees in global ecotourism. Destinations like Hawaii, Venice, and Bali are increasingly implementing these specific surcharges. They are explicitly telling visitors, your physical presence here causes environmental degradation. You use our water, you walk on our trails, your rental car degrades our roads, and you are going to pre-fund the cleanup. Ethically, it makes sense, but the real trap is the user interface of the booking platforms.
Right. The websites don't show the taxes up front.
Exactly. Under current regulations, many booking sites don't have to show the final fully taxed price until the very last confirmation screen. They hook you with the low base rate.
So the actionable fix for the listener is manual math. Add almost 20% to whatever price is flashing on your screen in big, bold font before you let yourself get emotionally attached to the hotel.
Exactly. Calculate the total before you click.
Okay, trap number 2. The rental car dependency. We established in depth why you need one. But if you think you can just show up to the Hilo airport walk-up counter like you might at a major mainland airport, you are getting slammed with walk-up rates of $70 to $100 a day. That's up to $700 a week.
It's brutal.
And if you try to outsmart them by saying, forget it, I'll just use Uber to get to the volcano, a single ride to the national park is $60 to $80 each way, assuming you can even find a driver to take you back, which we established is a massive risk.
It's a brutal lesson in dynamic pricing algorithms. Let's look at the mechanism. Car rental companies at small, isolated airports operate differently than at LAX or JFK. They know exactly how many unreserved cars they have sitting on the lot at any given hour. And their software algorithms dynamically adjust the walk-up price based on your desperation.
It's basically a sealed bid auction where the rental company can see everyone's cards.
That is exactly what it is. They know exactly how many planes are landing that afternoon. They know the island has 0 public transit infrastructure that can take a tourist to the volcano. Their algorithm holds those last 5 unreserved cars hostage, raising the price by the minute as they see desperate families walking up to the counter. If you arrive without a booking, you are a captive buyer. They will extract the maximum possible premium from you. But the data shows that pre-booking 3 to 4 weeks in advance drops that rate significantly, down to $40 to $60 a day.
So walk-up rates are literally a financial punishment for the unprepared traveler.
Oh,
Got it. Book the car the exact same day you book the flight. Now, trap number 3 is physical, not financial. The VOG and eruption closures. The sources note that active eruptions create VOG, which stands for volcanic fog, which is a haze of sulfur dioxide gas.
Yes.
And the gas can also cause the national park to just shut down unpredictably. Let's get real here. Is this VOG genuinely a day ruiner, or is it just a minor haze that makes for moody, cool photographs?
It depends entirely on your respiratory health and the meteorological mechanics of the wind patterns. Let me explain what VOG actually is. When Kilauea erupts, it releases massive amounts of sulfur dioxide gas. When that gas reacts with sunlight, oxygen, and moisture in the air, it creates fine particles and aerosols. Now, if the prevailing trade winds are blowing strongly from the northeast, they push all that VOG out to sea, away from Hilo, and you just get a spectacular, slightly hazy orange sunset. It's beautiful.
But what happens when the wind stops?
If the trade winds drop, or if the wind direction reverses, which is called Kono winds, that sulfur dioxide settles directly over Hilo and the surrounding towns. If you have asthma, allergies, or any respiratory sensitivity, it is absolutely a day ruiner. When you breathe it in, the sulfur dioxide reacts with the moisture in your lungs and your eyes to form a very weak sulfuric acid.
That sounds intense.
You will experience headaches, severe eye irritation, a scratchy throat, and genuine difficulty breathing. It is not just smog. It is a chemical irritant. Furthermore, the National Park Service monitors air quality in real time with sensors all over the park. If the sulfur dioxide levels cross a specific safety threshold, they don't mess around. They will immediately evacuate and close the viewing areas.
Which means you could fly 2,500 miles across the Pacific Ocean specifically to see the volcano, pay the entry fee, drive to the rim, and get turned away at a locked gate.
Which is why checking the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory website is as vital as checking the daily weather forecast. You have to build flexibility into your itinerary. If the wind is bad on Tuesday, you need to be prepared to pivot and go to the beach instead and try the volcano on Thursday.
Okay, with all these financial, logistical, and respiratory risks clearly outlined, I want to talk about actual physical safety. Because when people think of cheap travel, they sometimes think of unsafe areas. Is Hilo safe for the solo traveler? Is it safe for a family with young kids?
It is incredibly safe, but the risk profile is completely inverted from what mainland tourists or international city travelers are used to.
Right. The sources explicitly say the risk profile is natural, not criminal. You aren't worrying about pickpockets stealing your wallet on a train. You're worrying about flash floods in the rivers, vicious ocean rip currents, and intense tropical sunburns.
Exactly. Let's talk about the ocean first. The beaches in Hilo are not gentle, sloping sandy bays. The ocean drops off quickly, and the rip currents can be incredibly powerful. A rip current is a narrow channel of fast-moving water that pulls you out to sea. Tourists constantly underestimate the Pacific Ocean. That is a far greater threat to your safety than walking downtown at night.
That's a great perspective to have.
For solo female travelers, the report rates Hilo exceptionally highly for safety. The local culture is deeply welcoming, the daytime environment is very secure, and you aren't dealing with the aggressive, alcohol-fueled nightlife element you might find in larger resort cities like Cancun or even parts of Waikiki. But the flip side of that safety is the extreme quietness.
Right. The report mentions that Hilo essentially shuts down by 8 or 9 p.m. Restaurants close their kitchens, the streets empty out. It sounds like a sleepy, rural farm town. I have to push back here. Isn't that actually too boring for a solo traveler who might be looking to meet people, grab a drink, and socialize after a long day of hiking?
It depends entirely on what you're seeking. And I think we need to reframe the word boring as decompression. If you go to Hilo looking for a bustling hostel bar scene, pulsing music, and late-night networking, you will be profoundly, aggressively disappointed. But many solo travelers in 2026 are actively seeking refuge from digital noise and urban intensity.
I can see that.
By shifting the threat vector away from human crime and toward natural elements, the power of the ocean, the unpredictability of the weather, the raw heat of the volcano, the destination, forces you into a much healthier, more grounded situational awareness.
Yeah.
You aren't looking over your shoulder to see who is following you down an alley. You're looking at the horizon to see if a storm is rolling in. You are connecting with the earth, not a bartender.
That is a beautiful way to put it. You're trading social stimulation for elemental connection. And for families, it sounds like an absolute goldmine. The sources highlight the Junior Ranger program at the national park where kids can learn about geology, free waterfalls that are a 5-minute drive from downtown, and the incredible experience of seeing wild, massive green sea turtles basking on the black sand at Punalu'u Beach.
It is phenomenal for families, provided you have secured that rental car and provided you respect the ocean. but it does require active parental engagement. You aren't dropping your kids off at a fenced-in resort kids club with a counselor for 6 hours while you sit by the pool. You are actively exploring a raw, uncontrolled landscape with them. It builds incredible memories, but it takes energy.
This brings us perfectly to the ultimate clash of expectations. The things you will remember forever versus the things that will profoundly disappoint you. Let's look at the highlights and the hard truths. The highlights we've covered: standing at the Kilauea overlook at dusk, watching the crater glow, arriving at Akaka Falls in the early morning mist before the crowds, watching wild sea turtles. But the disappointments listed in this report are brutal.
They don't sugarcoat it.
No, they don't. The beaches are rocky, there are strong currents, and there is absolutely no white sand. The nightlife is dead. And the rain, as we discussed, is relentless. If I want a pina colada on a pristine, powdery white sand beach while a DJ plays lightly in the background, I am quite literally on the wrong side of the island.
You are. You're flying into the wrong airport entirely.
Is the lack of classic postcard-perfect beaches the ultimate deal-breaker for the average vacationer? I mean, when people say, I'm going to Hawaii, they are picturing white sand.
If we dig into the psychology of vacation expectations, we find a universal truth. Poor quality rarely ruins a trip. Mismatched expectations ruin a trip. Hilo does not compete on beach quality, and it doesn't pretend to. If you go to a high-end steakhouse and order a vegan salad, you can't be angry when it's mediocre and overpriced. You are demanding something the environment is not designed to provide.
That's a great analogy.
We have to look at the geology here. Why is there no white sand? Hilo is a rainforest town built on top of very young, jagged volcanic rock. The Big Island is the youngest island in the Hawaiian chain. The volcanoes are still actively paving the east side of the island with fresh black basalt. It takes millions of years for the mountains to erode, and it takes thousands of years for offshore coral reefs to develop, get chewed up by parrotfish, digest, and wash ashore as fine white sand. Oahu and Kauai have had millions of years to do this. The land on the east side of the Big Island is simply too young geologically.
So expecting a white sand beach in Hilo is basically failing at basic geological science.
Precisely. You are asking an infant island to act like an ancient one. And similarly, the rain is the engine for the rainforest. You cannot demand lush, towering, 200-foot waterfalls and dense, vibrant tropical foliage, and then complain about the water that sustains them. The water has to come from somewhere. Accepting the environment for exactly what it is, rather than what you wish it to be, is the absolute key to enjoying Hilo.
But let's say those disappointments are deal breakers for someone listening right now. They hear no white sand and rain, and they are out. What are the alternatives? The sources offer two main comparisons to ground us: the Kona coast on the other side of the Big Island and the island of Maui.
Right.
Kona gives you that dry, sunny, white sand resort experience. It's built on older lava flows on the leeward side of the mountain, so it doesn't get the rain. You get the big Hilton and Marriott properties. But you are paying a massive premium, a 60 to 100% markup on your hotel, meaning $300 to $450 a night minimum, and a 30% markup on food because you are eating at resort restaurants.
Which adds up incredibly fast.
It really does. Maui, on the other hand, offers what the report calls the complete package. You get the road to Hana for your rainforest fix, Haleakala volcano for your geology fix, the whale watching, and the incredible world-class beaches. But the prices are even higher than Kona, and it has an urban intensity and traffic that Hilo entirely lacks. To me, this feels like choosing a movie to watch.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah. Hilo is like a gritty indie film. It's raw, it's authentic, it might have pacing issues, and you might have to read subtitles, but it stays with you long after it's over. Kona is your big-budget summer blockbuster, highly produced, totally predictable, very expensive, but universally pleasing and easy to digest. And Maui is the Oscar winner that everyone agrees is a masterpiece, but it's completely sold out, crowded, and costs a fortune just to get a ticket.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Yeah.
And it speaks directly to the concept of friction in the travel industry. Maui and Kona are low-friction destinations. Everything is heavily curated for you. The roads are built specifically to accommodate tour buses. The restaurant menus are designed for mainland palates. The beaches have cabanas, lifeguards, and drink service. You pay a massive financial premium to have all the friction removed from your experience.
And Hilo.
Hilo is a high-friction destination. You have to navigate the intense rain showers. You have to time your visits to avoid local bottlenecks. You have to understand the dynamic pricing of rental cars. And you have to figure out where to eat when the entire town shuts down at 8 p.m. It takes work.
But the reward for navigating that friction is authenticity. You are earning your experience, not just buying it.
Exactly. You get to interact with a living, breathing Hawaiian community. You are participating in a local economy rather than existing inside a simulated walled-off resort environment.
So, considering the friction, the 18.5% hotel tax, the daily tropical car wash, the dynamic rental car pricing, but also weighing that against the live erupting volcano, the $12 fresh poke bowls, the ancient banyan trees, and the incredible waterfalls. So, what does this all mean? What is the final verdict? Is Hilo in 2026 actually worth it? Let's look at the final matrix from the report.
Let's do it.
For the backpacker.
Yeah.
Yes, with conditions. You have to accept the $110 a day floor, adjust your expectations of nightlife, and figure out how to split a rental car. For the mid-range couple, yes, it is the absolute sweet spot for value in all of Hawaii. $195 a day gets you an incredible, memorable experience on Banyan Drive.
Definitely agree with that one.
For the family, yes, it is highly educational and engaging, provided you can secure a permitted VRBO and you are willing to self-cater and cook your own meals to beat the food costs. For luxury, yes, but only if you value quiet, experiential luxury like private waterfalls over high thread count sheets and room service. And for the digital nomad or solo traveler, yes, for a short stint, it's great for a week of decompression, but the sheer isolation and lack of nightlife is very real after 3 weeks. So what does this all mean? I want to push you for a definitive answer. If you, the listener, sitting in your car or walking your dog right now, only have 1 week of vacation time this year and a hard, immovable budget of $2,000, are you picking Hilo or are you staying home?
You are absolutely picking Hilo, but only if you deeply understand what you are buying. Hilo's value proposition in 2026 isn't in being cheap anymore. The local tax increases, the supply chain costs, and the flight dynamics have definitively ended the era of Hilo as a bargain basement destination.
So what is its value?
Its value is entirely in being real. The Matrix proves it is absolutely worth the financial investment, but only if your core identity as a traveler aligns with the island's raw, uncurated nature. If you need a vacation to be effortless, if you need to be catered to, take your $2,000 and go to an all-inclusive resort in Mexico. You will be much happier. But if you want to stand on the edge of a smoking caldera and watch the earth literally remake itself, while eating the best, freshest fish of your life in a town that refuses to change its identity for you, Hilo is completely unmatched.
I couldn't agree more. It's an adventure, it's an education, but it's not a traditional vacation. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the complex, contradictory, and utterly fascinating realities of Hilo, Hawaii in 2026. We hope this breakdown arms you with the knowledge to navigate the taxes, dodge the crowds, and make the absolutely right call for your next trip.
And as we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought, something to really chew on that goes beyond budgets and itineraries. If an 18.5% tax rate, $500 flights, and $200 mid-range hotel rooms represent the affordable, pre-viral phase of Hilo, what happens to the local Hawaiian community and this authentic culture when this emerging destination inevitably goes fully viral? When the algorithms push the prices until they finally do catch up to Kona, will the Aina, the land, and the local way of life be preserved? Or is Hilo destined to eventually succumb to the economics of tourism, becoming just another curated resort town, losing the very friction that makes it so incredibly special today? Something for you to mull over as you plan your next adventure.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.